Okay, how people learn. There are about 7, I think, principles I have on how people learn. And the first one is they learn by visual and by auditory. I spoke earlier about this, is that, in fact, what do you think? Men or women, which do you think learn more visual or more auditory?
Visual.
Men visual? Yeah, I think they're the lookers, aren't they? And the women? They're the lookies, right? No, but it's true. But there are, you can't say specifically by sex, but oftentimes when a person's new, as I've mentioned, we have to do things more visually. You get advanced students, you start rattling off ace, queen, third, and hearts it was, like ace little and whatever. So people can do things more auditory because they're synapses. They've more formed those types of neural networks where they can do things by patterns, which I'll speak about in a little bit. The age does definitely factor into it. And on that very first item, visual and auditory, if you can do both of them, your learning is going to go up by quite a bit. That's why when we do cards on the table, people are going to learn a lot more information that way because they will see and they will hear. Yesterday, what happened? Joyce Penn said, okay, bridge tonight is going to be at 9 o'clock. Those of you who were the auditory, you heard. Those of you like Charles and myself, is that we're the visual. It said 8:30 on the thing. I was like, I'm not listening here. So if you showed up at 8:30, like probably most of us men would do, is that we didn't kind of catch when Joyce said that yesterday. But if we have both modes, our students will have up to about 80% greater chance for learning. And this isn't something I'm making up. There's a book that I read, a college book, E-Learning, that has a lot of studies on these types of things. So hopefully I have a couple quotes out of here that pass the litmus test. And then memory processing, we have 3 things that kind of slow down the memory process. One is we get overloaded, another is we're distracted, and we're confused. We don't have senior moments, we have intellectual interludes, don't we? Isn't that what it is? And then the transfer from our resources to our short and long-term memory. That is a process, and oftentimes it takes more practice to get it from one to another till we finally burn it in to where we think we've got it. And that's why we have drills. Mark Hummel, and if you go to YouTube and you search for Mark Hummel, you get to see something where he actually does this on a keyboard, but these people that memorize pi, check this. Get a load of this.
1.159265358479374384197169399371445923078164062.
You get the idea. He's gone about 10,000 digits, 12,000 actually, and I've looked to now, and that he was the national world record holder. Well, he's not the world. It goes up to about 40 or 50,000. How do these people do it? 40 or 50,000 digits of pi? Well, they do it by chunking. It's by grouping. And I've actually looked a little bit on the website. And so what happens is they learn in groups of 4. They get in groups of patterns. When people are chess pros, they can get about 10 to 100,000 different patterns. People that watch us play bridge that are new to it, it's like, how can they remember those cards? Well, we know a suit is 5-3-3-2. Here again, unless you need a slam, and then the odds are maybe not quite the same, but so we start to learn the patterns, and that's what our students do. They're learning these different patterns. So that's kind of, it's good to know and to think about is that's how we get things into our long-term memory. It's called chunking or grouping. Okay, next is speaking about Alvin Roth. I don't know if any of you heard this or seen this, but he was playing a money bridge game, and his partner was like some of my opponents. His partner noticed that they were in the 7 no trump slam is that the declarer wanted to know where the queen was. Didn't know where the queen was. Kept playing the suits out. The opponents were good at their level. They weren't going to disclose the shape. And so this came down to the final 3 cards of the hand. So he leads the Jack of Hearts. The person in West Oscar-winning performance. Waited about 10, 15 seconds, thought, and then respectfully played the 6. The declarer thought, well, the queen is over by west. Played low, and Alvin Roth had the east hand. And what did he play? He played low. And his partner is like, what was that all about afterwards? Why didn't you play the queen? And Alvin said, well, you took so long, I thought you had it. Okay, how people learn, part 2. Okay, we have things about the processing to go from the visual words to the eyes, to the ears, to the visual, to the phonetics. And then there's the narration side. Teachers' dialogue with the cards and the text actually improves that learning. And the coherence, if we focus on the main points and not too many distractions, then people will know, they won't get that overload situation. So a little bit later, we'll get into Miller's Law of 7 and the principle of parsippany. So we'll talk about some of those things. So at any rate, we want a conversational style normally when we talk to our students. Okay, general teacher's tip. We give exercises and we give questions. And hopefully they will mirror that real-world examples. And that will improve both the speed that they learn as well as their comprehension. In other words, we try to always make them activity-based. Charles and I work for AT&T and Lucent Technologies, and in our Bell system practices, the BSPs, we would have things like TOPS, a task-oriented practice. It would only have just the steps you needed to go to get from here to there. It didn't have a lot of extraneous information. Students that have easily access to visuals at the table. I know that Barbara, thank you for giving us those handouts there. Those were great, by the way. Did you do those yourself, or did I looked down? I kept thinking, where's the company that oftentimes you're associated with? And I thought you did a very professional job on those. So when we have things like what Barbara did for handouts that people can see when they're learning, they love the aids when they're coming up to speed. And as we mentioned, we want to avoid distractions. Yet we want to emulate the real world. Not maybe at the very beginning so far, but I remember Tiger Woods' father, when he was teaching him bridge, or golf I should say, every once in a while he'd like throw a towel down or slam something so that when he was around the audiences, which he envisioned him being a professional someday, that he would be in a mode where he wouldn't be where that would completely mess up his game. Okay, then we have our generic questions. If we use these, they're more enabling rather than the directive types of questions. Questions such as, how are these suits related in terms of, the card play that you're going to have? Or what are the chances of making a two-way finesse? How would you, and then you can, these are open-ended questions. They facilitate a greater learning. How does such and such work? Okay, it's time for a breakout session. So I have 4 different questions that you can think about here. Take about a minute per person. So if you've got 3, you can have a little bit more. But number 1, how do you prepare your bridge lessons? Number 2, what activities worked well for you? Number 3, what have you changed and why? And number 4, how do you get feedback? So think about those, and why don't you kind of talk amongst your table. We'll take about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll start up again.